My guest today is Andrea Petone. After a successful career in business and consulting, he had an epiphany and realised that his work wasn't aligned to his purpose and aspirations. He wanted to make a bigger impact in the world, and he did something about it. Since then, he has coached and advised over 250 leaders across the globe. And today he shares some of his key lessons he has learned along the way. I'm sure that you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Let me introduce you to Andrea now. Okay, good morning, Andrea. Welcome to the Transformation Leaders podcast. Thank you for joining us this morning. I love the way that you introduce yourself on LinkedIn, how you set clear goals when you were 24, achieved them all, but realised that there was something more to life. And more importantly, you did something about it. So please do share your story and explain a little bit more about how you became involved in leading change and transformation in the first place.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, first of all, Tony, for inviting me on your show. So my story is, I think, is an interesting one, as I think everybody's is, by the way. So, I think I achieved, as you correctly mentioned from my LinkedIn profile, I achieved what many people may want to achieve at a very early age, because by the time I was 35, I got an incredible fast track career. I became managing director of organization. At that time, at 35, I think I already lived in 5 different countries. Those kind of things that you dream about if you are ambitious, as I was a student and before that. So I think I went, I really followed a very interesting and growing trajectory for my career and my story. And then I think I fell into the confirmation success trap, right? So as many others, when you feel like you have achieved everything, you started to feel a little bit invincible because everything works. And what I realized, actually, then not everything works. So I had some sort of couple of, let's call them failures or setbacks in my career. And that for me were kind of a red flag, because something was not working anymore. And then I spent a lot of time to do something I didn't do before. That was essentially what I call self-discovery. So I started to understand a bit more about myself, who I was and who I wanted to become. So that path of transformation started, at least personally at that time, when I really created space for myself to discover who I was, who I wanted to become. And then things really changed, because I think by embracing humility and vulnerability, I started to become someone else. Mm-hmm. So when I say someone else, was less about skills, was more about an attitude of discovering or learning, of approaching things in a very different way than how I approached it before. And then I got my second life to some extent in terms of successes. And that's where we are right now, with a very healthy and growing practice, working with top leaders all over the world, especially CEOs and their executive teams, and helping them, leading massive transformation initiatives, either for themselves as a team or for some sort of strategic initiative like change, culture, and many things. But I'm sure that we can talk about this a little bit later.
No, thank you for that. And so how do you define transformation, given that broadness of your experience, both personally and working with the organizations and the individuals that you're working with globally now? What's your definition?
Yes. And this is such a powerful question, because I'm sure that you get very different answers for everybody. For me, I think transformation, Tony, is the ability to alter the status quo. Besides the meaning, the specific English meaning of the word transformation, for me, it's more about altering the status quo. Because transforming something, especially in the business world, to me means altering what is not working right now, and that is what the status quo is. Not accepting the status quo, it's altering the status quo to produce something that I specifically called extraordinary. So you see the word extraordinary in many things I say, I write, especially on LinkedIn, my articles, my book that is coming up. We'll talk about extraordinary legacy. To me, extraordinary is not such a bad word, although it's used like, a little bit of kind of a buzzword because we think about something impossible. I do believe extraordinary is just, as the vocabulary says, something not ordinary. And I believe its transformation is creating something extraordinary or something that is not necessarily working.
It's a great word, actually, isn't it? Because, as you say, different people see extraordinary in different ways, but ultimately it's ordinary and extraordinary, isn't it?
Exactly right.
It's
I think people. Yeah, no, sorry, Tony. I was just say, I think people get so scared about the word extraordinary as if it's something that we don't want to use it because it's kind of, oh yeah, extraordinary. No, it's just something that is not ordinary, and we should go back to the real meaning of words.
No, absolutely. And coming back to your point about transformation, that change to the status quo. Absolutely. And I think different people have different views of the word transformation and the context of transformation. Some believe that it's, as you say, a change to the status quo, and that change can be relatively small, but it can be significant. Other people, it's like it is completely opposite almost to what you're doing at the moment. But the reason why we ask that question is because it provides the context for the rest of our conversation. So thank you very much for that. It's interesting. Again, one of the things that you've done with your career since finishing your corporate career, shall we say, moving into more of a coaching consulting career. You've worked with leaders across the globe and helped them to facilitate their leadership skills in many different aspects. Obviously, the context of this podcast is organizational change and transformation. So what do you believe are the critical ingredients of a great transformation leader?
Yeah, so it goes back to mindset, Tony. So transformation to me has to take the major success factor, which is the human system. Mm-hmm. So there is no transformation in any organization that gets results if it doesn't really tackle the human systems. Now, the trap of many leaders thinking that what leads to transformation initiative success is essentially non-human systems, right? So strategies, plans, processes, which is a typical pitfall, is a perception that leaders believe that is true because they think that's what is needed. That's why, and I love them, but all the top tier major consulting firms, they created their own entire business around that. But to me, what is really missing is the ability to understand the human systems. But to understand the human system, you need to have the mindset able to understand how humans operate. Mm-hmm. And if you don't consider the human element in transformation initiatives, you're going to fail anyway. Totally. So I think if I take one single thing, besides, again, the technicalities of transformational change or all the processes that are in place, they're important, but they're definitely less important than the human system. So to me, is really what is the attitude, the mindset of leaders when they deal with transformation? And I think that is the real question, because to me, there are some specific traits within the mindset conversation that leaders manifest when they really want to transform the organizations. And to me, is number one is learning, right? So it needs to be able to learn what is really happening in the organization. And that, from a behavioral standpoint, that gets completed when they start having more conversation with people. And I'm talking primarily, CEOs or CXOs. Yeah. These are the people they are essentially leading, and they're owning these massive transformation initiatives. So they need to be able to spend more time with their people, understanding and listening what they're saying. But that requires a very high level of interest in learning. So learning is a top notion and attitude when it comes to transformation. And learning brings discovery. Discovery is something new, which is why they can then potentially alter the status quo if they approach whatever is happening in an organization in that way. There are so many examples of what I call the frontline leaders. Leaders have spent so many months just spending their time with the frontline. And frontline is not just operational people. Frontline is actually going and talking to the customer all the time. Yeah. we have seen CEOs from Starbucks, from Uber, from um, many other firms that had that sort of approach. So that's, to me, is learning, discovery, talking to people. The second element, I would say, Tony, is this idea of vulnerability. Is be vulnerable to look, challenge their thinking, to believe that what they think is true is not necessarily true. So this idea of admitting mistakes and sharing what didn't work before. And again, it's connected to learning, but the ability of saying, admitting, look, we tried maybe transformation before, it didn't work. That's my fault. That's something I should have done differently. And you need to have this approach when it comes to, leading such a major transformation initiative. And I would say the third element, going back to the human system, Tony, I think is the ability to enroll people in your vision of change. And again, that's something that's so easy to say, but based on my experience working with leaders, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because people don't understand, again, psychology, don't understand how humans operate, how humans think. So this notion about become human leaders, again, is completely misunderstood. We hear leaders, I mean, great gurus as well. I'm nothing against Simon Sinek, but Simon Sinek, talks every single day about humanity. But here's the thing: humanity is not just a set of values. Humanity is essentially understanding humans.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding humans, meaning understanding how humans operate and they think. So if you want to enroll people in your transformation, you need to understand how humans think. And I'm not sure many leaders have the capacity, ability, and patience to spend time understanding people. So that's, to me, are some of the key elements of successful transformation journey.
I think, and it's fascinating that you should say those three elements. I totally agree. I think, going in reverse, a key skill of any transformation leader is to win over the hearts and minds of the people. Because without doing that, as you say, you're never going to achieve the end, the desired outcomes. But equally, your first point about leaders getting involved in getting engaged within the organization, often when that happens, they see a completely different organization to the one that they think they're leading, in my experience. So because the direct reports are telling them one thing, but when you go in and experience it, it's completely different. But they need to have that vulnerability, as you say, to be in there and accept that actually the initial preconceived ideas of what the organization was like, what the people were like, what the culture was like, is perhaps not correct, and be willing to accept that difference, and be willing to accept that feedback and integrate that feedback into the plans moving forward. So totally agree that in my experience, those are three absolute critical elements of a strong transformation leader. So thank you for that. So in terms of transformation, organizational transformation, as we say, it's about changing the status quo, but often it's multiple years in duration. What type of things do you encourage leaders that you're working with now to do to try to maintain that momentum? After doing the work that we've just been speaking about in terms of winning over the hearts and minds, initially, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you go through the process and do it in the right way, you can get some initial wins back and get. But then if it's dragging on multiple years, then the momentum can start to drain, and people's willingness to continue to drive forward can start to wane away. So what types of things do you encourage your leaders to do to maintain that momentum?
And again, I love maybe the number 3, but there are 3 things in my mind that would be really significant, important to drive that. So to keep the momentum, during, as you say correctly, many transformation initiatives that last for, not a few months, but for years. So to me, the first one I think is, Tony, is is the why is more important than everything. Is explaining why transformation is needed. And again, I don't think is, and again, it sounds like counterintuitive, but the reality is the why transformation has is necessary. It's not so clear to people, especially when I talk to your organization during these initiatives and I interview them and talk to them and see what's their perception about change and the change is going to happen. And most of them, they keep saying the same thing is, I don't really understand why. What is the why? The why is just, you know, reducing the cost so we can have, larger profits. But what's really the why? Why didn't we need to change? Another example is all the major technology transformation initiatives. It really is difficult to understand what's the why behind, the superficial element of the new technology. So explaining the why, I keep talking to the organization, to the people about the why, to me is number one. The second thing I would say is, here's what I think gets really interesting. Right now, we are facing a moment where there is such a high level of uncertainty in the market. So companies are restructuring, companies are reconsidering their business model. I heard in an interesting interview a few months ago that 75% or so for of CEOs right now, they're thinking to change their business model in the next 3 years. Imagine the impact of that to the business. What does it mean is, if all these CEOs, I'm gonna change their business model, what's gonna happen? They're gonna start a new transformation initiative, because changing business model is a transformation itself. So the question is, how can you deal with all this pace of change that requires changing directions with the fact that you're sticking with one single vision for the future? And there is a third component as well. There is all the day-to-day activities, the operational day-to-day of the business that requires attention. And for most organizations right now, the day-to-day is reducing cost, is, essentially improving the bottom line in a very short period of time. So there is all this difficult dilemma mentally for leaders to understand or to deal with the today and tomorrow at the same time. And that requires a very high level of ambiguity. And not all leaders actually are able to do that. The visionary leaders, they don't really understand the short term and they don't give importance to it. And then there are the operational CEOs or leaders that just love doing the day-to-day, love the firefighting, and they probably disregard already what's going to be the future for them. So dealing with that, keeping a balance is important, because you want to, and that leads me to the third point, which is really engaging people. You want to get people enrolled in a change that you're doing, but if you are really get bogged down by the day to day, people, they don't really understand anymore why that change is important, because they see the leaders operating in a different way. So look, that I think is difficult, especially when the pressure is high for a leader, is understanding, okay, how can I keep communicating about the vision for change, the case for change, the future, when there are some immediate priorities that we need to face it. I think it's totally possible, but some leaders are just struggling to do that. They don't really mentally, they're not mentally prepared to lead the organization and doing both things. That's as ambiguity. And the third point, as I said, is enrolling people in the journey. And to me, the one single thing that is necessary is start really talking about positive progress in organization, positive progress about the change you are making. Now, there is a common, really common habit in organization, I'm sure that you experience the same, Tony, is that it's so easy in organization to talk about what is missing. What is missing? What are the gaps that we have? That is not working, and so forth, which is great because that gives you access to actions and opportunities. However, really, really few organizations, they stopped and say what is already working. Talking about the positive progress is important, because that is really creates the momentum and motivation for people to say, oh, by the way, the change is, the goal is 2 years from now, but I start to see the first results here. I start to see the things are moving. And unfortunately, many leaders, they are not used to having conversation with the people about positive progress. That's why they don't set even what we call early wins, which are necessary when you want to lead, especially a long-term initiative.
Yeah, it's interesting, Andrea. I think there's a number of things that you brought out there that's so critical, and reminds me of numerous different stories I use constantly when I'm talking to organisations. But coming back to your last point about those short-term wins and how they can contribute to the long-term vision, and I use a lot of sporting analogies.
That's a good point.
I'm a big football fan, and a few seasons ago, Leicester City won the Premier League. Small club,
Yeah.
just previously, the previous season, just avoided relegation, and then the next season they won the Premier League. And the manager at the time had this mantra that says we're not thinking about anything other than the next game, or our main objective is to get to 40 points, which was to avoid relegation. And then it might be to get into the top half. Then it was to get into Europe. And then ultimately they won the championship. And they were celebrated all the way through, celebrating these short-term wins.
Yeah, you go.
But ultimately, they had the long-term vision of being as successful as they could potentially be. But it was about celebrating these short-term wins, and I think that's so critical and lots of organisations can learn a lot from that approach. I think the other thing that you brought out, which was really interesting, was that difference between an operational leader and a visionary leader. And actually, I believe the transformation leader or the chief transformation officer is the interface between the two. I totally think you need to have that vision, that North Star, and that clarity about where we're going. And we need to understand the why we're doing there. And then we can start to measure everything against that North Star and the why. And the transformation leader is usually that pivot that can connect the two and make sure that operationally we're moving towards the end result. But equally, the transformational initiatives are all geared to allow us to achieve that North Star. So I talk about those two things quite a lot when I'm working with clients, and so it's really good that you brought them out.
And I like it because to me, it really lives in the intersection between the world of realism with the world of possibilities. And you have to sit in the middle of that. I think it's a powerful combination.
So one of the things that you bring into your LinkedIn profile that I was reading as well was you help people or help leaders to lead and empower their teams to raise the overall capability of the organization. So what type of things do you focus in on there?
So it's many different things I would say. So again, probably the number one thing I normally do with leaders and their teams is start shifting the organizational mindset. Just following, what we said before. I strongly believe that mindset is what drives performance, because mindset drives action, so action drives results. So I think it's really important to understand that mindset is what is needed if you're not happy. So a different mindset is needed when you're not happy with the results. And transformation and change initiatives actually they fall perfectly into this mix, because look, many people and organizations are reluctant to change. And more important, they are reluctant to change initiatives. Reason being, they've been through change before and most likely didn't work. And they say, okay, gosh, another change again? No, please, leave me alone. So all the kind of perception they leave in people. So there is a natural negative perception about change in organizations. So if you don't tackle it and help people to see a different sort of possibilities in front of them about change, they will be always very skeptical. They will be always very reluctant to change their own way of doing things. And you guess what's going to happen in change? As soon as something is not happening, something is broken, it could be a part of a process, could be part of something you expected to generate results, early days, but it doesn't. Guess what's going to happen? People are going to be very, very cynical and say, I told you so, right? I told you that change was not going to work this time. And once again, here are the proofs. So it's really much about organizational mindset. That's a part of the work I do, is probably the most part of the work. The other thing I
So
would say is,
sorry, Andrea, is
yeah,
that changing the mindset of the leader or helping the leader to change the mindset of their direct reports, or both?
it's both.
Yeah.
It's both. It's both. Sometimes it depends, what work I do with leaders. Sometimes when I work only with them, I work with changing their mindset first, because that is not, I wouldn't take it for granted they have the right mindset to lead these changes. And then if they need help, normally we get into the team and working with them on helping on changing, that sort of the shift in the mindset of their team too. The second element I would say is, after that, it's more about driving specific habits that can be really specific and practical at the same time. They can really support the mindset they are shifting in order to be more consistent in the way they are doing producing results. So to me, it's creating practices, creating those specific habits that can really lead them to operate in a different way. And again, it's not really much about learning new skills. It's more about how they need to spend more time together,
Mhm.
how they need to find a way to have better conversations when they work together. And when it comes to change, it's all about that, because it's how you work together as a team and how you can get the most out of the people they're working with, so they start making changes too. It's all about conversation. So habits, and as a standalone, they're great things, but they are not useful if they don't become a part of a viral element in organization where many people embrace the same habits. If the habit is correct and effective for driving change, you guess how powerful can be an organization when many conversation happen when people, I wouldn't say persuade, but engaging people in embracing new habits that can lead to something specific. So when you start to create a sort of cultural change in order to produce the transformation that you want to do, you start to see initiative that generates results way, way faster than most people think. So, in other words, when you unlock mindset and you create specific habits and practices to put in action what is your new mindset, you see changes at a very, very fastest rate. And so I would probably challenge the notion of change, always takes long. Yes, it is based on the scope of transformation, but sometimes it takes long because people just struggle to understand change and to execute and whatever, right? But when you unlock the power of mindset, habits, things sometimes, kick in very, very quickly and way quicker, faster than what people think.
And do you find that on the habits side in particular, or yeah, on the habits side in particular, do you find that in many instances it's an element of simplification that really helps? Because organizations by definition tend to be complex,
Yeah.
and as they evolve and develop, complexity goes on top of complexity on top of complexity, and people stop talking because there's a system in place or there's a process in place. And sometimes just stripping that back and getting down to, well, you sat next to the person that's doing this next activity, why don't you just talk to them and have a conversation, as opposed to following this elongated process, breaks away all that complexity, and suddenly there's a breakthrough, and they can understand what's needed and why it's needed a lot easier. Do you find that that's pretty consistent, that it's about simplifying the organization in many respects to drive that mindset
It
shift?
is 100%. And I think when you start listening to people, they need to then um, execute the change, primarily them. If you interview them, as I often do, you will always hear the same thing: is we are too complex, we are not simple enough. So they're always looking for simplification. Sometimes, to be fair, these are not the guys that bring in complexity. Unfortunately, are the leaders.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they bring complexity because they are not understanding fully what works, across the ranks, because they don't have perception about how people operate. That's why going back to the point of human systems against versus strategy processing plans, so the non-human systems. I think there is a typical, probably wrong perception that when you start to create the non-human systems, things are going to happen.
Mm.
So that's the tendency of leaders is going to the non-human systems. That's why they're missing the point. And the point is understanding human systems. In human systems, they're looking for simple way of operating together. So the key is exactly that.
No, great, thank you. And transformation can be stressful. It can absolutely can be stressful for leaders that are driving it forward, but it can be stressful for the people that are being in receipt of the change, shall we say, or having change imposed upon them. What type of things do you do to alleviate your stress if you feel it? You may be one of these people that, because of the processes and the thinking that you do, you might not necessarily feel stress. But what are the things that you do to help yourself manage any stress that you have, or any stress that you feel within your life?
That's your asking directly to me, right? Not to the
Yeah.
clients.
So well, maybe how you help your leaders. It's we
Yeah,
ask this question primarily because different people have different approaches to manage,
right.
and not there's not one, like anything. There's not one answer, is it? That's right for everybody. So we're just trying
Yes.
to open up some of the discussion to say, well, if you try this or try that, or this has worked for other people.
And I think it's both relevance, by the way, because it's important for the leaders as well as important for people, especially these days. So look, my personal, I would say, approach to stress and pressure is the idea that when you start to get into the weeds of change, that's the why when you start losing yourself. And then when the time when you really start to be stressed
Mhm.
more than what you probably considered before. And that's a let's not talk about what are the old consequences of stress, because we are all aware of.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure all the leaders are aware, by the way, what is the implication of stress right now. So, and that's, I think, is something important. In my book, again, I'm going to write about one single section about the element of well-being for CEOs. The book is for CEOs, but primarily the well-being, what does it mean for them? Because if they don't tackle it even on organizational level, they won't really drive well-being for the entire organization. But going back to the point, to me sometimes is reflecting a little bit more and say, okay, am I in the weeds right now, or am I elevating myself?
Yeah.
That is the real question that's really important to me. So sometimes when I doing something, the first question I have is when I start to feel not okay because I feel stressed, tired, or whatever, I start to think, am I too much into the weeds right now? So am I more into the tactical elements of what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Is this something that can be done by someone else, first of all? Is this something that I need to do it, or there are some more important priorities that are much more important to me? And then normally leads to a better question is, am I what I'm doing, is it aligned to the vision I have for myself? Is aligned to the purpose that I have, the goal that I have? And sometimes as humans, we tend to forget that we are working for a bigger purpose, that is whatever is the tactic I'm working with. And to me, working across different initiatives, not only changing initiatives, but working again on my own, I'm writing a book is, as you know, is demanding. It requires, mental freedom. It requires time. It requires dedication, focus, and whatever. And you can't operate at the best of your ability if you don't feel in that way, which is what I call, what many scientists call the flow. Being in the flow, being in the moment, and focus on what you're doing, right? So to me, it's always important to say, okay, what I'm doing is aligned with that, is important, or I'm not. So, and then of course there are also tactical elements, say delegating things that you don't necessarily need to do, or for example, funding or some. time in your calendar and block the time for yourself so you can really be in the flow. Um, and the other thing I would say, Tony, is this idea of multitasking. It's so bad. It's so bad. And I think this this notion that's been created by so many entrepreneurs that in order to succeed you need to be multitasker, you need to to be able to do many things at the same time. And I did myself. So one of my major mistakes in my own entrepreneurial journey was multitasking. And unfortunately on this I had a very bad mentor, great mentor, but one thing, he was a bad mentor because he was all about multitasking. And then I started to realize, I mean, I'm not able to achieve anything with multitasking. The best I can do is just, mediocre or just sufficient results. And that to me was transformative in itself because I started to understand multitasking is going to be really bad for performance. And I'm someone that does so many things. So you mentioned LinkedIn, but I have, as you have, my own podcast, the World Class Leader Show. I interview, CEOs every week. Is demanding, as definitely you are aware of. Writing a book and working with clients, people every day. I receive messages. How can you do all of that? And the question is, I'm able to manage my time, and I'm able to understand what is important to me. And so that's, I think, is all my approach about
Yeah,
personal stress.
it's interesting. Is that time blocking and understanding. Going back to something that you said earlier about understanding the why. What's the why for you as an individual, and what you're looking to achieve? Yeah, sort of your personal North Star, but then being clear on whether the activity that you're undertaking at the moment is leading you closer to or further away from that North
Yes.
Star. But a tool that I've used, came across it a good few years ago. I've been talking to lots of people about it. Is as you go through your day-to-day activity, you'll naturally get pulled into stuff that's not adding any real value or not taking you closer to where you want to get to. It's taking you further away, but you'll naturally gravitate to it. So being clear about what those things are and having a very clear to don't do. So mark out the things that you don't want to do as a list on next to your computer. It's just a memory jogger to say, actually, yeah, I shouldn't be doing that. I should be delegating it, or I shouldn't. It's not important, or it's not urgent. I'm just going to leave it. It's just as important, I feel, as having a good to-do list. Yeah, it's a tool that I came across a good few years ago, and talk about it a lot. But yeah,
They're very tactical, and really tactical elements like understanding how to delegate. They are critical. The other thing I would say, Tony, is also understanding from a neuroscience standpoint the difference between the distress and eustress,
yeah,
and understanding, when you are where you are in the, bell curve, right? Because there is a bell curve, right? So when you started to get stressed, but it's a positive stress, you're doing things, so you started to get busy, but you're passionate about it, and whatever, you're still into the very huge stress. So it's very positive, and that stress actually generates results. But there is a point where the huge stress becomes the beginning of your distress, and distress leads to whatever we know, and to the worst case, to depression, mental issues, and whatever. So I think in my personal experience, Tony, I really learned, as someone that used to be really stressful for many, many years, I really learned to understand where I am in this curve.
yeah,
And sometimes, look, it's a qualitative evaluation, right? So there is no kind of matrix or indicator that can tell you exactly where you are, but you know your body, you know yourself.
yeah,
And when you start to know yourself and you understand where you are, you already know, okay, that's time to push back, or is it time to hold what you're doing, or maybe it's the time to go for a walk. I think it's important to understand sometimes people, they don't really understand when they are. So they're already into this stress mode, but they don't really understand it. They don't realize that that's where they are. And that's going to get way, way more difficult to go back to a positive stress situation because you're already into
yeah.
potentially, a negative situation for your well-being.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So just bringing the this show to a close. What's your sort of number one non-negotiable, you leave behind? What's the one thing that you feel is critical for leaders to have when they are driving change and transformation within their organization?
Humility, 100%. This idea of being humble meaning many different things to me. Humble means to be able to accept the feedback, able to share, you know, a failure, able to admit a mistake, able to listen without judgment. There are so many different nuances of the word humility. And to me, that is the one that drove me to where I am right now. And it's something I want to see as well in leaders. And I have to say, I'm maybe a bit more biased, but I would say I'm lucky to work with some of CEOs, some of the most humble CEOs I never met. And you can see the real difference in how they operate, how the teams are operating, the performance they're having. So to me, it's such an enabler for performance.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And when's your book coming out, or have you got a date for it, or is it still in the middle of being written?
It's still in the middle of being written, but is going at such a very and unexpected fast rate. So most likely will be written by end of June, and then there is all the time for publishing, editing, publishing. So I think probably best case scenario would be by Christmas, which is will be fantastic if I'll be able to have it by Christmas.
Brilliant, brilliant. And where can people get hold of you? Is it best through your website?
Well, I think LinkedIn probably is even better because that's where I engage with people every single day. I write every single day. So, people really can find my posts and whatever I insightful. So feel free to connect there. And also my podcast, as I said, so the World Class Leader Show, I think is a way to go for people that want really to understand how CEOs think.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put a link into both those into the show notes. So with that,
I appreciate it
very much. It's been great, and I'm sure lots of people have been able to take lots of good ideas from this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. That was an amazing conversation.
Andrea, thank you so much for joining me today. I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion, and I came away with so many ideas that I look to introduce. I'm sure our audience will do too. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We're always interested in hearing from you. What do you find useful from this pod? What would you want us to explore more in the future? Please do press the subscribe button. It really helps us to reach more people and share the experiences of all my guests. See you soon. Bye for now.